morning. I'm Pat Jenny. I'm president of the Salisbury Forum, and on behalf of the board, welcome all of you here to our first program of the fall season. Tonight, as you know, we are focusing on artificial intelligence, or AI, in our local schools. AI is everywhere. It's informing what we read, how we conduct our work, our social media, and certainly influencing how our children and grandchildren are being educated. We've designed this program in partnership with staff from our 3 local schools, who also happen to be the hosts of the Salisbury Forum events. Hotchkiss, Salisbury, of course our host tonight, thank you to everybody here, and Housatonic Valley Regional High School, along with an organization with particular expertise on this topic, and that organization is EdAdvance. This is our 3rd September presenting a panel of speakers rather than just a single person. And so it's a new forum tradition. And I also want to recognize at the top the support of Connecticut Humanities, which supported this particular program with a matching grant. As all of you know, the Salisbury Forum programs are free and open to the public. And that's why we seek your support to bring these speakers here. We're about to commence our fundraising drive for the year, so you will be receiving a request to donate in the next month. And thank you to all of you who have already contributed during 2024, covering our modest operating costs. It's easy to donate. Just go to our website or any of the emails announcing the programs and hit the donate button. On Friday, October 25th, we will welcome David Kirkpatrick, who is a contributor to the New Yorker magazine and a former journalist for the New York Times. The title of his presentation is The News on Trial, and he will discuss how the media is covering the upcoming November 5th election. Whether you are consciously avoiding media election coverage or consuming far too much of it, you will be interested in David Kirkpatrick's analysis. And then on November 22nd, William Cohan will be following the money as he is interviewed by Kurt Anderson, a return and popular Salisbury Forum participant. Cohan is a contributing editor at Vanity Fair and writes for a number of other periodicals, such as the Financial Times, Fortune, The Atlantic, the New York Times, and he's an author of several books, including House of Cards. Tonight, we have a very knowledgeable group of panelists this evening who are eager to share with us their thoughts on how AI has altered how they educate their high school students. Fortunately, Jonathan Costa has agreed to be the moderator this evening. He has been a recognized expert on digital tools for K-12 learning since the 1990s. As the assistant executive director of EdAdvance for the past 8 years, until he became the executive director this July 1st. EdAdvance is one of Connecticut's 6 regional educational service centers established by a Connecticut statute and governed by members of local boards of education. Its mission is to promote the success of school districts and their communities. Jonathan's career in education began as a secondary level history and social studies teacher. He's a graduate of Fairfield University and has advanced degrees in educational leadership and certification as a school superintendent from Central Connecticut State University. He authored a book called Digital Learning for All Now and has written numerous articles and participated in many conference presentations. He's worked with over 150 school districts, nonprofits, and businesses here in the tri-state region, and facilitated over 100 strategic plans, led several statewide level projects on behalf of the Connecticut State Board of Education, and he formerly served as vice chair of the Litchfield, Connecticut Board of Education, and currently serves on the Commission for International Education. Our panel this evening includes Ian Strever. Many of you know him as the principal at Housatonic Valley Regional High School. Sarah Mulrooney, who is the Dean of Academic Life here at Salisbury School, and Richard Davis, Dean of Academic Life at Hotchkiss, as well as Matt Mervis, who is Director of AI Strategy at EdAdvance. So please join me in welcoming Jonathan Costa.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to be back in the northwest corner. I grew up about 8 miles from here. My high school history teacher is in the audience. It's nice to be back in the northwest corner. So the program today, we're just gonna spend a few minutes with you to give you sort of a baseline, sort of where we're at with AI. And then I'm gonna introduce the panelists. We're gonna ask the panelists some questions, then we'll have some time for you to ask us some questions as well. So, it does seem, and this happens all the time, because I let my computer go to sleep, and now I have to wake it back up, which I'll do. Just wait a second. Yep, it does seem suddenly that AI is everywhere. And I do mean everywhere because this is a screenshot of my sleep app, and if you ask it, it will summarize your night of sleep. And while clearly ChatGPT gets a lot of attention, it is the tip of the iceberg. One of the things that's hard to sort of wrap your mind around is that it's only been public-facing since November of 2022, so we're less than 2 years into this sort of public sphere of AI. But AI as we know it has been thought of and pursued for as long as there were computers. As early as the 1950s and 60s, people were thinking about what the potential for ones and zeros were if you configured them in the right way to do things that humans do. And you'll notice in this timeline that area around 2000 where it says crossing the desert. Prior to that time, the pursuit of AI was through algorithms, which are fixed rules. And the early thinking was if we could create enough rules to guide computer thinking that mirrored the natural world, we could create artificial intelligence. The natural world is just too darn complicated. And this crossing the desert was getting to a part where we have a decision-making layer between the input and the output layers. And this is where the explosion of large language models comes from, and this is what made the public-facing AI that we know today possible. And the best way to think of this is these are giant synthesizing machines. They crawl gigantic amounts of data, images, sounds, words. They take your prompt and they are really good at predicting what you want to hear or see. It predicts the next word, and that's how it's able to compose. It configures the pixels to show you an image that you want. This is an image that my friend Matt had ChatGPT generate to sort of demonstrate how AI crawls data from just about everywhere and produces things that you think are useful. I have been doing this a long time. This is my 40th back-to-school season as an educator. My first teaching job was in a school that had a mimeograph as a copier and a student and faculty smoking area. That's how long ago this was. I remember arguing with my colleague Matt about the future use of email. He despised it and fought it. This was in the early 90s, in the early years of email and the internet. We've seen the age of mobility, and I'm here to tell you that it is my opinion that this last wave, collective artificial intelligence, will do more to change the way we run schools than any of the three previous combined. My fear is not that AI will change schools, it's that schools will not change fast enough in the face of AI. So 3 big ideas, and this is presenter's privilege. I do believe this is the final curtain for rote learning. If there was ever a time where you could convince me that memorizing vast quantities of data is the best way to train a mind to think, even if you could prove it, you will not sell it to a generation of students raised in an AI world. And the other thing is the breathtaking pace of change in this field. What is happening now is really the beginning, not the end. And if you are a policymaker in public education, in any field of education, at the speed in which we develop and implement policy, anything you think of, by the time you've gone through the process, it's too late because it's different. Any planning that we do must be focused on what will or could be, not as what's happening now, because the pace is just too great. So, where can you find AI tools? Just about everywhere. They are on your laptop, on your home PC, on your phone. Everything my phone does, my watch will do. Everything my watch does, there are glasses that will do. So when you talk about banning cell phones in schools, you might as well set up a metal detector and take everything away, because you are not going to be able to keep this off of your kids, off of yourself. It's just going to be ubiquitous. The laptop I'm using right now is about 3 weeks old. It has an integrated Microsoft AI Copilot key. So you want help with your you want AI help on your laptop, you hit a key. That's all you have to do. And what can the tools do? I'm going to give you about a 15-second video that is a compression of about a half hour's worth of work between my AI strategy folks and ChatGPT 4.0. And it mirrors sort of a progression of a student contemplating using AI to do an assignment on cell mitosis. So we'll start by asking Chat to do a 5-paragraph essay on cell mitosis. That's pretty good. It's never going to believe I wrote that. How about shortening it and giving me 10 spelling errors? All right, that's good. How about Mandarin? Could you do it in Mandarin for me? Oh, that's awesome. I need some illustration. Can you give me an illustration of cell mitosis? Oh, cool. It's a little complicated. How about making it simpler, like maybe a kindergartner did it? Oh, excellent. How about 3 dimensions? Can you do that for me? Oh, cool. You know what? How about a song? Can you do cell mitosis in the style of the Broadway show Ricket?
Cells divide, it's quite a sight, my dear. The magic's in how they split just right from one to...
It's getting easier to talk about the things it can't do. And the scary thing about this is, from the very beginning, when you started, it can do text, but it can't do images. It can do images, but it can't do music. Well, it couldn't do that until it could. And, for example, ChatGPT 4.0, which up until September 13th was the most advanced model, has been replaced by 4.01. And what I'm going to show you is a video clip of Matt's son asking ChatGPT 4.0 to solve a riddle and watching its response, and then seeing the exact same riddle given to the next generation model, which came out 2 weeks ago.
The wriggling worm in its cave is ugly, but spins art despite it. The weathered advice of old maids says that in a pinch you should bite it. Though it might send a fool to his untimely grave, it's tyrant's bane for the bold and the brave. This is a riddle. What's the answer?
Using ChatGPT's 4.0 model, the AI was unable to successfully solve the riddle. Prompted with the same riddle using the 4.01 preview model, this model uses a chain of thought reasoning, and you can see it actively moving through the reasoning and planning process. You can also see the model reflecting on its findings, revising its approach, and strategizing to find the correct result. And by doing that, was able to successfully solve the riddle.
So essentially, ChatGPT 4.0 was estimated to have an IQ of about 90. 4.01 jumps it to 120. So these tools answer questions, compose narratives, engage in conversations, create lessons, compose music and lyrics, compose images, interpret images, solve complex problems, write code. Download this one. This is Fridge Smart. Open your refrigerator, take a picture. It'll inventory what's in there. Just check off what you want to get rid of, and it'll give you recipes for what to cook. The implications are endless, and yes, as with any human invention, there is great benefit and there are dark corners. So everything humans can do that is good and bad is intensified by this technology. If I ask ChatGPT 4 to create an image of me with controversial content, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris in a fist fight, it won't do it. It has parameters. It has guardrails. Grok 2 is a large language model sponsored by free speech advocate Elon Musk. It has no guardrails. So you want a picture of Trump kissing Kamala? It'll do it. How about an image of Mickey and Minnie Mouse getting hammered? It'll do that too. I don't have to tell you what else it would do. This is our lovely executive producer for our Skills 21 team, Cam Audia. Take a listen.
Hi, I'm Cam Audia. How are you today?
Hi, I'm Cam Audia. How are you today?
One of those is fake, one of those is real. 11 Labs has a voice synthesis tool. It gives you a script, you read it, certain intonations, certain syllables, and it is remarkable how good it is. We use scripts, we feed it to 11 Lab to narrate all our videos in AI Cam voice. This is going to challenge us in ways that are hard to predict and understand. For those of you who hope it will just go away, it won't. Because we live and work in an economic system where time of response matters. And there's just a giant pile of money waiting for the folks who get there first. And so, will it be the end of lawyers? No. But it will be the end of lawyers who don't use it. And, this is capitalism is a double-edged sword. Driven by the pursuit of capital, we are in the early phase of an economic transformation that will see millions of low-skilled workers with nothing to do. Robotics, AI, and algorithms are sort of laying waste to the non-traditional workforce, and AI is laying waste to traditional, non-engaging, non-relevant instruction. At my agency, we think of this in terms of vulnerable or durable. There are lessons that are vulnerable to being undermined by AI, and there are others that are durable in its face because they can't be completed by a large language model. This is the public school transformation, the school transformation that I believe is on the horizon. That if we don't engage in durable instructional activities, things that students are required to use their own thinking and agency to solve and complete, we will turn school into an irrelevant gathering place for young people. Our AA mantra at EdAdvance is increase the cognitive challenge and decrease non-timely content. We were all educated, everyone in this room, I am confident, was educated in an era where we were taught something just in case. Just in case you get asked this question, you are going to know the answer. And we live in a just-in-time world. You must be able to make value at the moment you need to make it, and with the tools most appropriate to get that job done. This means we are going to need to be ruthless about how we prioritize content. In the end, it's simply not reasonable to assume that the same approach to teaching and learning that was born of the printing press can survive in an age of AI. At EdAdvance, we think of it in 3 different pathways. We understand that our employees need a conceptual understanding of what this is, why it matters, what the impacts might be, just to get it, to understand what's happening. And then to give them the capacity, the tools they need to use these tools to advance the cause of education of our youth. And finally, they need the curiosity to understand that this is going to beat convention. We need to think about patterns of behavior that were born of a different era and think about how we can rethink and remake them to meet the moment and to engage our kids in a meaningful educational experience. The essential question really is going to be, what does it mean to be educated in an era of AI? There is still a foundational level of knowledge that everyone's going to need to know, but it's not what's in the Common Core. There's too much. We need to let stuff go and engage more deeply in what's left behind. I am thrilled that both the co-hosts of our agency podcast of K-12 education, Chat EDU, are here with us, Dr. Liz Rade and my friend Matt. We do a podcast, they do a podcast every Friday, drops at 5 in the morning, 30 episodes worth so far, and it's dedicated to processing what is happening in the world of AI and how it impacts public schools or schools in general. I encourage you to listen. It's wonderful. They do a wonderful job at it, and it is quite educational. Sorry for the shameless plug. But for all of the hand-wringing about the future of AI, it is not what you think of, I don't believe, it's what you think of from Terminator 2, right? It's not the sentient robot that's going to take over. It's going to be people of ill will who use it to manipulate and control people for their own benefit. That's why critical thinking, which was a critical 14th century skill, is going to be an even more critical 21st century skill. We need to be thoughtful and considerate and keep moving. And we need to help each other, because if we wait for others to do this work for us, it will be too late. And that's why I am thrilled to have our panel with us tonight, because these are people who are working in this field with kids every day and are here to share their experience with you. Panelists, come on up. Jenny already gave you a little introduction. I'll just go a little deeper. Richard Davis, wave, there's Richard. Joined the Hotchkiss faculty in 2006. He served as the head of the Classical and Modern Language Department from 2008 to 2013. In 2016 and 17, he was a faculty leader in the effort to revise the school's mission. And in 2021, he was appointed the Dean of Academic Life and was identified by the head of school as the in-house expert on AI. Sarah? Sarah serves as the Dean of Academic Life at Salisbury, as well as history instructor and co-director of international students. She's been identified as the in-house expert by the head of school at Salisbury, and both Davis and Mulrooney have a broad understanding of AI's use across the curriculum in their respective schools. Ian's been the principal of Housatonic since 2018 and has the overview perspective of the use of AI in the curriculum there. He was the assistant principal for 7 years prior to his appointment as principal. He also served as the head of the English department for Danbury Public Schools and has a master's degree from the University of Bridgeport and Western Connecticut State University. My friend Matt, I've had the good pleasure and wisdom of hiring Matt twice. Once in 1992, and then we both went off on our own, and then again, when did you come back?
2014.
2014 as the head of Skills 21. Matt is a thoughtful educator. He is the co-host of AI and Education podcast, Chat EDU. He leads my Skills 21 team in EdAdvance, where he's focused primarily on enabling project-based learning and AI. Prior to that, Matt served in a range of roles, including social studies teacher, PD specialist, district tech director, and product developer. Matt presents frequently on AI and the future of education for regional and national audiences. A hand for our panel. All right, so the first question I'm going to ask for the three folks who are situated in schools right now, can you give us just a brief history of the evolution of your institution's thinking about AI? So that's a 2-year window. Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, this was fun to go back and think through this. Just a reminder that we're talking about less than 2 years of history for most of us in terms of an awareness of AI, especially generative AI, which is the sort of the big topic we're talking about here tonight. And so going back to 2022 in November, when there were rumblings that this chat bot, this generative AI piece was going to be released to the public, and oh my gosh, it can do all these things, and it can write papers, and it can do X, Y, Z. You know, our initial response, and I was a part of this, was sort of focused on concerns about cheating and academic integrity and plagiarism and all those pieces, and I will fully admit I bought into the idea that we could detect the use of AI and that there were ways to catch students doing it, and so we spent some time focusing on restriction, detection, and prevention of AI use for those first few months. And as we were going through that sort of scramble process, more of us started to learn about what the potential positives were for this tool. Had the opportunity in the summer of 2023 to do some professional development as well, and learned a whole lot about really innovative ways that teachers were finding a way to harness these tools. And the shift towards understanding and exploring AI's potential was present. We started talking about it at an administrative level. I showed ChatGPT to my admin colleagues in the summer of 23, and it blew their minds. We played with it together and worked together on a sort of not a policy, so to speak, but a philosophy. And we went into the 23-24 school year with the sort of the watchwords being curiosity and discernment. Let's be curious and stay curious about this tool, and let's also think about what are the appropriate ways to use this ourselves, and also to teach our students to use it. It's interesting, this year, at the sort of opening weeks, and it's sort of in preparation for this conversation, I did a quick survey, asked a few basic questions. How are you, what are the ways in which you allow your students to use AI? What are the ways in which you use it with your students, and what are some of the ways in which you're using AI for your administrative work, your sort of planning and behind the scenes work? And the first 4 responses came in fast, and they came in furious, and they were all in the category of, I don't touch it, I don't let my students touch it, and I don't use it for any reason. And I was like, oh no. My first reaction was like, oh my goodness. There are a lot of folks here who are really scared, who are really, sort of stunned and maybe stuck and frozen. Overall, there's a lot more of a balanced approach to it at the school now. A lot of us in the sort of humanities departments are trying to find ways to embrace the reality, teach our students how to use it, teach our students how to use it responsibly. And I am becoming here this evening more aware of a responsibility that I have to really drive us forward to continue to educate ourselves, because those hard and fast faculty who are like, I refuse to use it, I refuse to let my students use it, that's going to be problematic going forward. So it's kind of where we are right now.
I still remember the day in November when Matt wandered into my office and showed me an example, and it was, wait, what? Holy, a string of expletives that we can't repeat, and just knew right away that this was going to be something that was going to rock people's worlds.
Yeah.
How about at Hotchkiss?
I remember, I would say ChatGPT was kind of sat at the table with me a lot in that winter holiday of 2022. It was released, I'm going to say mid-November, but the first I paid attention to it was when the Chronicle of Higher Education published an article. It was like the end of the essay or something like that. And I was like, what is that about? And then kind of like got myself an account and started playing with it. And of course, we did all the things everyone does. It's like, oh, let's write a Christmas carol in the style of so and so. And then we had lots of fun with it. And then somewhere in the middle of the winter time, the head of school asked me, hey, can you lead the trustees in a discussion on AI? And it was like January 20th, and I was like, oh my gosh. So I kind of did a deep, I really was starting from nowhere. I'm a classicist by trade, you may have heard, which I'm not a technology Luddite. I get really excited about new tools. We were talking earlier about how when HTML was first released, I was trying to figure out how to use a web page to help the teaching in my classes, but this was definitely felt like new territory. Somewhere in that time period, the New York City public schools banned its use right before the start of the school, and so that got a lot of attention. I have to say, that to us at Hotchkiss did not seem like the right course of action, and I think really what we did was we took the same approach to this as we've taken to other technology tools that have been released and kind of accelerated upon us. It's really one of exploration. What is this thing? What do we think the future impacts on our students are going to be? What are they going to need to learn how to be able to do? And of course, there's so many unknowns in that, but really, our position, we absolutely had to come up with some guidelines for teachers and students about kind of related to academic integrity. I think teachers had to think a lot differently about what we count as evidence of learning, particularly if it's not happening in your presence. I think that changed pretty much overnight for the written word. But then really from there, we put that in place, and then we've really tried to create a sense of urgency in our faculty around it, because we also have a wide range of, as we have with other technologies, like early adopters, people who don't want to go near it, and a bunch of people in the middle who are like, I need to help figuring out how to make sense of this. And so really, I would say in a way we're sort of in that same place of trying to get as many people as possible to use it, to figure out what it can do, to test your assignments on it, as you said, how durable are our assignments in the face of this. And of course, it's not just ChatGPT. There's a new version of ChatGPT every, week, not quite, but there's several other models out there that are all kind of in this race for all those billions of dollars that we've been talking about. And so, anyway, I think we're still in that place of exploration and trying to figure out what it can do. I would say the same thing to all of you. The best way to sort of figure out what it can do and what it can't do, and because they all have their own little personalities, like every large language model has its own set of training data, and just log in and see what it can do and what it can't do. It's pretty exciting and terrifying and all the above. And so anyway, that's a little bit of a sense of where we are in our approach.
Okay. Ian, how about Housatonic?
It's a relief to go last because I was afraid that our school was a little slow to adopt, but I think everybody's in the same sort of spot right now. I know when I first discovered it, it was probably around the same time that the Chronicle of Higher Education article came out, and I started to explore it, and I'm pretty sure I gave at least one English teacher a coronary when I displayed it for her and showed her what it could do. It is kind of an existential threat to teachers as we have known them, I think, in terms of standing and delivery. It just is not going to hold up in the way that Jonathan described. And so I started with that experimentation that Richard described, and it was terrifying to me too. I mean, it is a game changer, and fortunately I had Matt Mervis, who was presenting a workshop that right around that time period, and I was able to sit in on some of his message that really talked about embracing it as a tool and to use it functionally in a course that we teach as a capstone project. They have embedded it in part of their curriculum to allow students to use it as a brainstorming tool, as an idea generator, and that sort of changed my perspective on it. And so I've been really optimistic about where it can go, but not all faculty are there yet. And as the debate and the discussion has continued, it's been embraced really by our humanities teachers, because I do think that, especially in the realm of composition and writing, they sort of stand to lose the most. And that debate has sort of brought them towards the center slowly, that it's not the worst thing that could ever happen, it's not the best thing that could ever happen, but somewhere in the middle is where we need to be with it.
One of the differences in the panelists is that we have three folks who are in the trenches every day, and Matt, Liz, and I get the opportunity to go around and see a lot of different examples. And so Matt brings a lot of different experiences, interactions with a lot of folks from all over the place. And so I'm going to ask you, Matt, in your training with staff as you travel, what do you find are the most common misconceptions that educators, parents, and students bring to the AI experience when they interact with it and work with it?
Sure. Yeah, and thanks to the forum, to the folks at Salisbury, we had the greatest little dinner and conversation with a number of students, and it was fascinating. I mean, I think one of the most wonderful things to do is to have conversations with students about their perceptions around this technology right now, because they generally, especially this crew, well done, right? Yeah, really spot on. Yeah, I love everything Jonathan shared and characterized, and so I think some of the understandings, not the misconceptions, that AI can be a way that students can bypass learning, they can take shortcuts, especially on those kinds of vulnerable assignments that don't really challenge students to bring all their best thinking to the process. I think if you're trying to see around the corners in terms of misconceptions, there's a couple. One, generative AI is relatively new, as Jonathan said, right? The T in ChatGPT, interestingly enough, Google invented, even though a couple companies have seemed like kind of passed them by right now. But it's a new technology, and at the same time, there's remarkable, wonderful things happening in the fields of AI that aren't about making the Udio song, which I absolutely love, right? How can you not? And so fields of machine learning and deep learning and these things called AI vision are doing really just remarkable things around drug discovery, materials development, energy development, which is good because the generative side of the house is using all the energy. So we need something to try to offset that, in addition to opening up 3 Mile Island again.
Yes.
So yeah, I would love for there to be a more balanced view of AI. Certainly I understand why generative AI, the words, the images, the videos, the songs have caught everyone's imagination. But for students, especially, we sat with some students. Yeah, so I would love a balanced view over time, especially because some of these students can go into these fields, some of these really bright kids here at Salisbury, and do remarkable things with other forms of AI. The other is we're totally obsessed with this little text-based chatbot, right? If I encourage you to try one thing, some of you may have played with a ChatGPT. There's a fascinating tool from a guy named Mustafa Suleiman, who's now the head of AI at Microsoft, and Reid Hoffman, who founded LinkedIn. They have a tool, I didn't check to see my cell access, but this thing called Pi, Hey Pi. It's a voice-based model, not enough cell here, we're in the northwest corner. But AI is going to leap out of that little text box, just sort of like Udio did, but the ability to have a back and forth conversation with something that feels quite human is going to be fascinating. I'm convinced that that's going to go from a voice-based conversation to a video and voice conversation, maybe someday to holographics. So generative AI and all of its remarkable ability will take on new forms beyond text. And what's especially cool about that, one of the students at our table while having dinner had done some research work, had done a study, and discovered that when students use AI for tutoring to help them practice their learning, that they had a double impact, a kind of improved impact on their learning outcomes. I like it. We'll go for one and we'll pass it around. Nice. And we just saw a similar study from Harvard. I mean, these tools can help kids bypass learning. They also can be remarkable supports to students to learn and master content. And when they go from just being a little bit of text kind of jumping back and forth to something that you can hear and see and interact with, and though it's slightly freaky, the idea that it can know students and know their abilities over time, I think are going to be important. So yeah, just understanding that AI is a wider field, and understanding that AI is going to move from being a text-based interaction to a really engaging voice, video, and maybe even holographics. The people who are building AI, they watched all the sci-fi movies, right? I'm not convinced they always watched them to the end, but they watched them. And so it will give you a little bit of tell where we're going. All right, where would you like me to pass the lone mic?
We'll go back in the original order, and we're gonna. You mentioned, I think Sarah mentioned the reaction of the New York City Public Schools at first was to ban it, and that is based on the whole premise that in a just-in-case teaching and learning model, if you're depending on someone else to know the facts, you're cheating. Mm-hmm. And so cheating was the specter that led to those early bans. And everyone understands, if I hand you a paper and said I write it and I didn't, that's wrong. And if I write it myself and give it to you, that's correct. All the trouble is in the gray. So I write it and I ask ChatGPT to help me correct it. Is that wrong? Is it any different from giving it to my older brother? Mm-hmm. All of the trouble is in the gray. Mm-hmm. How did Salisbury navigate the ethical implications so far of AI?
Yeah, did in the past tense. No, it's doing it. After we got over the shock of it all, and we never went to the banning piece, but we were, policing it quite a lot. When we got a chance to learn how the tool can potentially support and enhance learning, as well as better understanding what some of the risks were in terms of vulnerable assignments. The onus is more and more on us as teachers to be really clear on what the boundaries are on any given assignment. Most teachers have a syllabus at the beginning of the year that says like, this is what plagiarism is, and don't break the honor code. But as these tools become more and more sophisticated, our knowledge of them needs to become more and more sophisticated, and our relationships with our students, and if you hear me say our boys, it's because I'm a teacher here at Salisbury School, but our relationship with our boys really comes back to the forefront. That clear communication about what the boundaries and expectations are is super important. And I tell the boys too at the beginning of the year when I do my academic integrity speech, to make sure everybody understands who this lady is and which hat I wear. I ask them to hold their teachers accountable too, right? If you're ever feeling like there's gray area and you're not sure where the lines are and how to stay sort of within the lines, then please ask, right? Hold us accountable to be really, really clear. How to properly cite it, at what point in the process can I use it? Can I use it for brainstorming, or can I use it for drafting? How much of my paper might I use a GPT for? And so it really comes down to us embracing and owning the fact that we have to give them the boundaries and then hold them accountable.
You want to pass the mic down?
Yeah.
While they're passing the mic, there was an interview on NPR last summer, not this summer just passed, but the summer following ChatGPT's release. And it was an interview with a business professor from Berkeley and a rising sophomore from Columbia undergrad in the city. And the interviewer asked the business professor from Berkeley, how are you going to deal with AI? It's like, we have 3 different language detectors. We're confident that if kids write papers and don't write them themselves, we'll catch them. And they go to the student, the student says, we don't use it that way. We ask it for ideas. We pick one, we ask it to outline, and then we write to the outline. So go ahead, have your large language model detector, and it's not gonna help you. And it was just fascinating to see the difference between an adult in a sort of a compliance mode, and a student saying, listen, we're just trying to save some time. This is fascinating. How about at Hotchkiss?
Ethical. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. How have you dealt with the ethical considerations around cheating and the use of AI?
I'd say pretty much the same way. I mean, we talked about this at dinner a little bit, that what I've told teachers, what I've told students is that any good assignment has to begin with a question, like, what is it that I want my students to be able to do at the end of this work or this curriculum or what have you? And AI, like a lot of other technological tools, you can use it to bypass, and if the actual learning, or not. Actually, it might actually enhance. It might be something you want. And so I'll sort of give a concrete example. Like one of our chemistry teachers actually having kids use it to design experiments to test certain things, and then like working on the critical skills of analyzing what it's done. And because the AI does not live in the real world, and there are certain things that are possible and not possible, and so. There we're actually using it, and the students have a very kind of clear guidance about how to use it in that particular context. And it's not the inventing the thing that the teacher wants, but it's the evaluation skill. And then it's useful. You could actually have it generate a whole bunch of text that with errors that you want students to practice proofreading, and it can do that as well. So really our rules around integrity are also very much about clarity. Part of that is because we're in this exploration phase, and we really want to give teachers some leeway to explore and try things out. And so an outright ban is not gonna help that at all. But I think it's clarity has been our approach.
So, I guess a similar kind of tack, but I think trying to stick a detector on it is kind of a fool's errand at this point. So I think we've taken the approach that the solution is really to create the assignments, to create the rigor, to create the durability that's built into the assignments that make them attractive to students, that they're topics that they want to write about. I strongly believe that when a student is passionate about a topic, when they want to write about it, they will write reams about it, and they want to explore it. Writing is thinking, and the best writing reflects somebody who's passionate about their topic and who explores it through a process as well. And that process can be slow, and it's necessarily slow at some points. You may have to stop and take a day off to get the best writing that you need to have. It might benefit somewhat from ChatGPT or another source of inspiration, but there's some germination that has to happen. That's part of the natural human writing process. And that's why, in my opinion, it's the most important part of what we teach in schools, and that's obviously because I've got an English background. But I think it's the most important part of humanity, frankly. It's why Shakespeare's 18th sonnet lives with us today. We're still recalling those lines hundreds of years after he passed away.
You could pass back to Matt. So Richard said something very interesting and important when he mentioned the fact that a good lesson will. And many of the technologies that we have seen roll out in the last 40 years are sort of intensifiers. So the internet gave good teachers remarkable new tools to be even better teachers. And it made lazy teachers scared, because much of what they were asking kids to do could be done or found on the internet rather than through their normal, studying processes. AI is the same. It will intensify and focus on teachers who design good lessons and give them wonderful tools to deepen them, and it will further terrify weaker teachers. The irony of it is the very tools that undermine weak instruction, if trained properly, can actually help teachers improve their instruction. Matt, can you talk to us a little bit about custom chatbots and how they can be used to design good, durable lessons?
Okay. How many of you have used a ChatGPT type tool in the last, I don't know, a couple weeks. All right, so about half the room. So we're now moving into the slightly deeper end of the pool, because if you're not familiar with one of these little tools, I guess just call back Jonathan's video where the tool suddenly could write a shorter paragraph and misspell every 10th word, which is really a walk in the park for that technology. So a large language model, one of these text-based systems, or even an image system, you put in a prompt and it will generate something for you, and each time that prompt is sort of unique. You can, over time, build things that will be trained on some of your own stuff. So in the world of teaching and learning, right, what do teachers do a lot? They write a lot of lesson plans, they design a lot of instructional environments, they write lots of newsletters, for instance. Now, we can have a whole fascinating debate about whether or not a teacher should ever turn to an AI chatbot to write their newsletter. But let's play fantasy land with me for a second. Let's say a teacher's super busy, I know it's hard to imagine, and they've got to write this newsletter. And they've been writing a newsletter for the last 15 years. So a custom bot, right, is an instance where a teacher could upload the last 15 newsletters that they wrote, and it would learn their stuff. It would learn how their newsletter is formatted. And then some news happened, stuff happened in the classroom. And rather than write an entirely new newsletter from scratch, they would go into a version of ChatGPT and type in, this happened, we went on a field trip. This happened, we did a project in our class. We went to the aquarium. And it would essentially learn from all the previous newsletters, and it would crank out a brand new newsletter for a teacher in a fraction of the time that it would have taken them. So a custom GPT, I have a kid in college. He tells me that he uses his custom GPT because he struggles with his introductory and concluding paragraphs. So he uploaded 15 of his academic papers from the previous year, and I don't even ever look. He shares an account with me. I don't see what he's doing. It's possible, but he could also say, help me write a paper about X, Y, or Z, and it kind of understands his context. Now my son's use case, I don't know that I love. A teacher who is time pressed, right, and has done this work and has the cognitive skills, I'm not sure that I wouldn't rather than have a custom bot to help them do the work so they could go on and spend that time to have a conference with a kid or a parent. I mean, this is the unlock for AI. Every workshop I do, I walk around like Monty Hall or Phil Donahue or right? And I ask teachers, what has AI done for you in the last several months? I actually combine Monty Hall with Marie Kondo, right? Who's famous for sparking joy. So I'll ask teachers, what has AI done for you in the last several months that has sparked joy? Every single room. Look, Jonathan and I have been at this for a while. We have been advocating, some might say hawking, Jonathan, I don't know, but we've been advocating for different kinds of technology. This is the first thing I've worked on in my 30 plus years. John's got another 10 on me. Where room after room after room, teachers tell me that AI helped them save time or deliver results for kids in different ways. We do this thing called differentiated learning or differentiation of text. So I have a piece of text, I've got a kid in front of me who doesn't read at that level. I can put that text in the AI chatbot in seconds, can differentiate for that learner, right? Or Sarah's really into turbochargers. You can't tell from looking at her, but Sarah's all about turbochargers. And so maybe I'll write a thing about cell mitosis and say, throw in a little turbocharger in seconds, right? So I think that's kind of, I wandered off the farm, but what a custom GPT will do is help teachers do things in a more efficient manner that's based on the work that they've done to save time. And I'm pretty much all about that.
We've talked about feeding existing curricula into a chatbot to give curriculum writers feedback on how vulnerable or durable their assignments are. I have a video clip of ChatGPT cranking out an 8-lesson unit on a 10th grade math standard in about 1 minute and 5 seconds. 8 lessons, a month-long unit planned in seconds. And if you don't like it, change the prompt. Oh, add an exit ticket. There it goes. So if the rich get richer. If you are smart and curious and want to improve, there is a way these tools will help you do it, while if you're not, they are just going to undermine what you're doing because you're just not going to be able to stand in front of a group and do it. Are you seeing use cases in your schools where teachers are using the tool to thoughtfully either change what they're teaching or how they're teaching, improving their materials? Can you talk a little bit about use cases you see in faculty in terms of improving instruction?
Yeah, I think a good example might be a teacher who has used debate quite a lot to help students develop an argument and you know, practice civic discourse, but recognizing that the students' speeches could just as easily be composed in a chatbot, and you know, the question of are they doing the research that is needed to develop the argument, et cetera, et cetera. Recognizing that there may be a way to tweak the goal. So we heard a little bit earlier that the question should always be, what is the purpose of this assignment? What is the purpose of this project? What is the purpose of this homework? It's small, large, whatever. And maybe tweak the goal. So this teacher decided that they wanted to stick with debate, but they were going to focus instead on helping the students understand the role of critical thinking and how important that is to like everything, but especially when we're talking about generative AI, let's have the generative AI create the text for the debate. Let's give it the topics and let it have the debate. Let's ask it to come up with 5 responses to the question or the topic, and then let's have the students analyze those 5 arguments and talk to each other about which one is the strongest and why, and which one would they cut and why. And so what ends up happening is maybe the argumentation and research skill was no longer the target, but debate is still a really fertile area. Students love to compete, they love to argue, so it's still a really fertile area, but we're looking at developing a different set of skills. So it's a similar use of the curriculum, but it's harnessing this tool in a way that maybe makes critical thinking the focus. So that's one example that comes to mind. Yeah.
Richard, how about Hotchkiss?
Should I risk this?
You can try it. We'll turn the other ones off.
This. Yes.
Gotta say something now.
Yeah. Okay. A couple things. I'll just use an example from my own classroom. I was telling this story before that I only teach one class as the academic dean. I spend most of my life in meetings and phone calls, all the things, observations. But I do teach a class, which is the anchor of my day, and for the last 2 years I've been teaching ancient Greek. And so one of the things that I've been trying to do is find a large language model that I can actually do ancient Greek with any kind of accuracy. And I've not tried the newest GPT, ChatGPT iterations, but last spring when there's another model called Claude, which is produced by a company called Anthropic, which in some ways may have a little bit more educational bent, at least in terms of their mission. We will see. But right now, and sure enough, what I was doing, and I'm teaching Greek 1, it takes a lot of time to invent like appropriate sentences or paragraphs for students to read. It's too early in their learning to read authentic ancient Greek. We've already read everything in the textbook. So what do? I sit with the vocabulary list and I try and come up with kind of interesting, as funny as I can make them, whatever, engaging stories, sentences, what have you. And so for a year and a half, I've been trying to get GPT to can you please generate some sentences for me? And basically, I'd spend 30 minutes doing it and then regret it because it didn't do anything. And then I can't remember which version of Claude came out, but it was this past April, and I tried that one, and it was it gave me 30 sentences, and I said, give me 30 more. It was pretty disciplined about keeping to the word list that I asked for, and I didn't have to proofread a lot. I didn't have to. There wasn't modern Greek stuck in. It wasn't made up words. It wasn't words that aren't in the vocabulary list. And so it was the first time where it really was a time saver for me in my instruction. I will tell you that I have a colleague who teaches Spanish at the Hotchkiss School who's been using it from the beginning to generate level appropriate readings in Spanish. And that's purely a function of the learning data that the model has. And so GPT has plenty of good Spanish in its model, and so it did a great job producing level specific Spanish. If y'all are interested in learning foreign languages, you can have it generate level appropriate reading for you on any topic you want. The new voice one, it'll speak Spanish with you at any level you want. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there's some really concrete examples.
How would I order a decaf skim latte in ancient Greek? Do that?
I haven't tried that. Coffee came in the Middle Ages. Yeah, I think so.
Ian, how about a Housatonic? I'll turn mine off.
I think we're okay here. I'll pick up on the language learning model because I think it's a really fascinating one, and it can certainly be an existential threat to language teachers because you can correspond with a computer and practice your fluency, practice your language skills with an appropriate listener, essentially, and get feedback on your performance. What was really interesting was in our conversation again today, it's amazing when you pick up and you talk to students about these sorts of things, that you can actually program it to be aligned with actful levels or proficiency levels in a language. So if you feel like you're a beginner 1, you can have it correspond with your level of proficiency. And so I think that's a really good use of it. At our school, I think probably the best use case I've seen was a real game changer for our photography course. And in terms of creating imagery, it really changed the way that students modified their images in production and caused them to start to know the vocabulary better about how to talk about aperture, talk about the the specific width and diameter and the dimensions of the photograph that they were producing.
So, unfortunately, most of the data in these large language models look a lot like this panel. It's been generated by white men with maybe a dash of a few women in there, but it's largely unrepresentative of a great swath of the human population. And so you ask these models questions and you get biased answers based on that view. Matt, what is the current state of bias in large language models? I know they're concerned about it, they're working at it. Are they? What's happening in terms of bias in large language models?
Yeah, the current state is bad. And if you spend a little time with one of these tools, if you want to get a sense of how that actually works, let me give you some concrete examples. Ask ChatGPT to write a story about a nurse, and 100% of the time, the story will be a female. Ask ChatGPT to write a story about an engineer, and 100% of the time, it will be a man. Liz and I were playing during our podcast, we were playing with Instagram, has a Meta, right? Instagram, Facebook. They have a little chat bot that they've put inside the search button, which they did totally on purpose, by the way. And so we asked on the air, we didn't know how it was going to go, on the air, when you podcast. We said, tell me about a job with someone named Matt and someone named Liz. And it said that Matt would have been a bunch of stuff that my mother would have been thrilled had I been, which were not wrong. But it was data scientist, engineer, doctor, lawyer. It said Liz is typically in more caring professions. What was it, Liz? It was like nurse, graphic designer, teacher. It didn't say that you bake cookies at home, but it was like on the edge.
Yeah,
right?
Clearly very gendered.
Yeah, so, and in fairness, right, there's a lot of efforts being made by the folks who make the large language models. I mean, John sort of explained this, but these models, the biggest chunk of data that they come from is something called open crawl, where they go out all over the internet to collect data. And at least in Massachusetts, over the border where I live, the internet's a reflection of us, and we're not always perfect people. And so all of our biases, racism, sexism, misogyny, all come through from what's called the training data that sits inside the models. And so it's, you know, it's both that, we talked about this a little bit too, I'm thrilled about the class assist piece, but yeah, they tend to be very Western centric too, they tend to be male, but try it, you know, go home and ask ChatGPT to tell you a story about a nurse, and maybe I'll be proven wrong and you can email me and tell me not, but so far I think Liz just tried it a couple times for a course that we've been building, that's been the case.
Image generators too, if you use the image generators, it's a really obvious way to, like, it's the images that are on the internet and all the biases that are in there, it can be really quick.
There was a very, when Google relaunched their large language model and when they rebranded as Gemini, they had made a big point about how it was going to be more culturally responsive. And that was a selling point for them. And in the very first day of its release, somebody asked it to generate an image of the founding fathers, and there was an African American man at the table with Washington, Jefferson, and Adams. And it's like, we appreciate what you're trying to do, but we were even more biased then than we are now, and so even when they're trying to do the right thing, sometimes they end up stepping on something on the way. I want to make sure we leave a chance for folks in the audience to ask questions, so I'm going to do a final run through the table, and it's not on the page, so I'm going to throw you a curve. Biggest hope and fear, AI next 5 years.
Honestly, for me, Neuralink. The possibility of this ending up as something that could be embedded in your head is terrifying.
So I mentioned I'm going to just say it, he's a whack job, Elon Musk, but he is a disruptor, and he does have some interesting insights, and he has a division of his company called Neuralink where the goal is to have implants where, let's say, you want to download US history. Click, and it's in your consciousness. They have used one live model, one live person has tried it. Future trials are underway. It won't be long, folks, where just, all right, I want to download all of Shakespeare's works and you'll have them. It is really kind of wild.
But also, I don't remember all of Shakespeare's sons.
Yeah,
so
that's right. Yeah. Crazy. Richard?
I mean, just as far as, you want me to say with education or?
Go anywhere you want.
Goodness. So I guess, maybe I'll stick with education. I am very excited about some of when I think about what we might be able to do in terms of like personalized learning and personalized needs, like the tools are already super powerful in the hands of people who really want to learn and have a little bit of skill in creating prompts. That is super exciting to me, and I think it can really be an accelerator of learning. I think what worries me the most is actually like the human element and just how gullible we are, how prone to taking shortcuts we are, and the degree to which technology is already so seductive and it pulls us away from each other. And I think there's a part of this that feels like it's just another way that I'm going to be, my phone is going to talk to me in a way that is just like caters to me. And I don't have to worry about someone else's feelings or making space for the other person even to talk. It can all be about me. And I don't think that's going to be good for the fabric of like human society. And I would say, another example, some percentage of what comes into my inbox right now is not generated by humans. I think that is just the amount of that is just going to go up, the amount of noise is going to go up, and then we're going to have AIs that filter it for us. And before we know it, there's going to be these layers kind of in between people, right? Like it's not, like I don't know what that person wrote anymore. Anyways, that's the part that worries me on an existential level. At least personally, I think if there's anything I learned coming out of the pandemic is that like our kids need human connection for their development. I need human connection just to keep myself sane and happy. And so for me, I think we're just gonna have to work even that much harder to kind of figure out like where technology is good for us and where we really need to put it away.
Excellent. Sarah?
I think for me, an anxiety is just the pace of change and innovation, and trying in some way, shape, or form to keep up with everything. That definitely is really intimidating and overwhelming, especially sitting in the seat that I sit in as in a leadership role in this institution. From a hope, sort of from a positive side, I think that when these tools are used, I speak from my own experience. This week I had a really awesome AI week. AI came through for me this week in a lot of ways. I'm working with 2 groups of 9th graders, and I'm just learning who they are and what they're about and what makes them tick. And I'm getting new information constantly about their strengths and their weaknesses and who needs what. And I was able to pivot on a dime using my situational judgment about what I saw happening in the classroom and what I was seeing in terms of the work they were producing. I was able to pivot on a dime with the help of AI this week to create some activities that allowed me to differentiate in my classroom, to be able to break kids into groups and let some of them work independently while I was working with others. And honestly, if I had tried to come up with a solution to a problem that I recognized before tools like this existed, it would have taken a lot more time. What that did was that freed me up to really be able to plan that human-to-human, teacher-student connection that needed to take place in the classroom over the course of a few days. And I'm super grateful for that. And so my hope is based on the potentiality for streamlining the vast amount of busy work that does come into play for us as teachers. If there's a way that we can effectively streamline that to give us even more time to have relationships with our students, to help them individually thrive and grow. So I have a lot of hope about that, and I'm feeling super grateful for AI right in this moment as a teacher. Yeah.
Awesome. Matthew?
Yeah. So none of my fellow panelists mentioned like Skynet or existential crisis or Terminator, so I'm not going to either. I think that actually a lot of people, when they talk about AI, that's the fear, right? Oh, will the AIs take over? There are job things I think we have to think about, but sometimes I wonder if the near obsession with, will AI take over the world is a way. This is not a conspiracy theory necessarily, but a way that we don't talk about things like bias or hallucinations or deep fakes or energy consumption or intellectual property theft. I mean, there are a number of real-term present challenges from the folks chasing the dollars that I think we should be focused on now. We should be focused on in the next couple of years. And then we'll pick up existential dread in a couple of years. Sort of deal with the here and now. On the hope front, I'm drinking all the Kool-Aid there is around on AI. But specifically, I remember as a high school history teacher, I feel like half the time my job, or all the time, my job was to help kids build like some knowledge and skill on a topic. And then if it's really going well, then do a project around that. Have them apply that learning in some meaningful way. I'm getting increasingly convinced, and one of the students that we sat with again today pointed this out. I think I mentioned before, a new study from Harvard pointed this out. I'm pretty sure that the building the knowledge and the skill helped me understand the battle of Bull Run. I think the AI tutors are going to actually wind up being super proficient at that. What I would like to see is some of that load come off of a teacher so that they can then do something really cool. Ideally, I agree, like with no technology in sight. Do some application of the new knowledge and skill that's built in some session I had with my holographic tutor so that I can then have my class come together and do something meaningful with that information. That's where I hope we'll go.
Excellent. You mentioned the seduction of one of the key contradictions of the digital age is the seduction of ease, right? It's easier to do it with this, it's easier to do with that, and we chase the ease of life. And yet if I ask you to write down 3 things in your life that you're most proud of, I guarantee nothing on that list was easy. It was hard, and that's why you're proud of it. And so we, on one side, we get all these messages about it'll be faster, it'll be easier, but in the real meaning of life is doing the hard work of relationships, of accomplishment, of fluency. Those are the things that bring meaning, and we need to be able to balance those things as we navigate this path. So thank you to the panel. Now it's I'm sure there aren't any questions. So, yes, ma'am.
First of all, thank you. I went, and I hope I won't see plastic bottles again, but my husband and I attended a lecture about AI at Tanglewood. And two things, and thank you because you've taught me so much. One was that Microsoft and Adobe were working on a little box that they could put in on images, and you could click on that to see if it was AI. And it was an interesting bedfellows. The other showed a man who was going to apply for a job, and AI looked at him and told him his hat was really wrong. He needed to get a haircut, and it literally was like a person telling him how to prepare for an interview.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, but there's also a set of biases that are built into how you're supposed to look for that interview, right?
I'd like to know if there are competitors. You mentioned Claude, competitors to chat. And what are the Chinese children using? Do they have their own, or are they using chat?
So they do have their own. Some of the largest models in the world right now are coming out of China. And they're not the only. There are multiple kind of nation-state models. And part of what's interesting about that is that they can be trained in very sort of closed ways, so that the government, the Chinese Communist Party, can make sure that it will answer in a particular fashion. I guess you could say the same is true for Sam Altman at some level. But yeah, there's 5. I think we're all of a vintage in this room where we'll remember Ask Jeeves. Yeah? So I often say we're in the Ask Jeeves era. There are 5, at least. And now if you consider Elon Musk's, there's sort of 6. But they will likely all consolidate down to a handful. Right now you have Claude, which is, I love, actually the founder of Claude is a guy named Dario Amodei, and I'm wondering if he was a classicist, because why is there, so you have Claude, you've got Microsoft, you've got OpenAI's ChatGPT, there's a little thing called Hey Pi that we play with a lot. So there's a handful, but they will narrow down pretty significantly. Who knows what it'll be, but maybe Google and Microsoft or Amazon. Yep.
I mean, to be clear, like the amount of money it takes to train a model, the amount of processing power, and you'll see in the news how all these big companies are basically hoarding chips, like computer chips. The amount of energy it takes to run these models, it's very quickly going to be in the hands of just the mega companies. It's Google, it's Apple, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft.
I'm wondering, the basic literacy and functional literacy is a real challenge for many people in our country, and of course, more disadvantaged people may not have access to a lot of these tools. So what is AI doing? I imagine AI can come up with great ways to teach literacy, but what's happening in that field?
It's just like anything else. There is great potential to level the playing field if there's a political commitment to spread the resource around in a way that allows that to happen. What might more likely happen is that folks who have access to those resources will speed ahead, and those without access will get left behind. It's the unfortunate reality of a political system that doesn't necessarily value equal access. And if you have one public, like in our state, one public school district next to another, and the per pupil spending is 3 times or 4 times in one district than it is the other, you could have all the potential you want. You're not going to be able to reach those kids. So this is going to be a political challenge. Do we have the political will to ensure that the most important tools are in the hands of those who need them most or those who can afford them?
Just real quick, I just want to throw in, so this is a unique Connecticut problem at some level. We have the most stringent data privacy law for students in the state in the public schools, right? And so that's probably a good thing, but it has led to schools not having AI accessible to students in school. And so while you already have a pretty significant digital equity gap in Connecticut, it grows wider because the kids who have access to paid tools and the like at home are really outpacing kids who don't. So there's efforts in the legislature and other pockets, but we spend a lot of time in our public schools, especially in some of our urban public schools, trying to make sure that all students have access to these technologies so that there is a more level playing field.
Can you hear me? Yeah. You started out the conversation by saying that these are tools, right? When I grew up, English composition was a tool that everybody got trained in. So I'd like to ask you as educators, what are you doing to educate the kids on how to use this tool? Like, do you have classes where they weekly try different things using artificial intelligence? Why don't you embrace it? That would be a form of embracing.
Well, yeah,
Thank
I
you.
mean, Matt and I and Liz spend most of our days advocating for that kind of approach. One of the peculiarities of modern educational structure is that if you look at the school day and school year from 1900 to today, we haven't added 1 minute of instructional time. We have added 1 million things that have to be done. So when I talked about ruthless prioritization, we need a concerted effort to rethink what is taught and how it's taught, so there is room for students to learn the tools that they will need. The students who are in kindergarten today are the class of 2037. So kindergartners in Salisbury Central School will graduate from Housatonic in 2037. What tools will they need? Those are the tools we should be teaching right now. And we are teaching tools for mid-20th century. And it has to change. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox.
No, and I would agree with you. I mean, fundamentally, the etymology of intelligence means somebody could choose between words. That's what was valued in terms of an education. If you have a large language model that can make those kinds of distinctions, you've got to change your definition of intelligence.
I guess I would say that to your point, education has lots of purposes also. I mean, I would say, yes, we're
He is a classicist.
Yeah, we're obviously training students to become with skills they can use in the workplace, right? And some functional skills. We also want them to be good citizens. We want them to have good character. And quite honestly, I think there's also you talked about Shakespeare. I think there's also we need to teach. We're trying to teach kids how to make meaning of the world they're encountering, and that's not always going to be, how do I use this technological tool? Sometimes it will, and sometimes it won't. And so, I mean, to your point, I think there's absolutely, and I hope, and I'm pushing teachers in my school to find ways to incorporate it, to create some level of AI literacy in our students. I also would say it's changing so fast that I actually think we need to be more a little bit above, teaching kids to use ChatGPT, and more we just this level of AI literacy that transcends the tool of the day.
One aspect of that's really important, I mentioned we haven't added any more time. Every durable instruction activity, and Richard talked about good lessons, take longer, right? If I ask you to what are the capitals of the states in New England, and you just memorized it last night, it's a 5-minute exercise. If I ask you to debate why the capitals became the capitals they did, and were they good choices, and defend a new capital for your state based on an argument that you want to make, that's a 2 or 3 day lesson. And a teacher is going to do that at the expense of coverage of other stuff. So we're putting teachers in positions where they have to make choices between sound, good pedagogical lessons and racing through to get to the end. And that is a choice that is not fair to put them in.
Amen.
He's running for office on.
Yeah, that's right. That's it. You have your hand up, sir. Yes.
Producing youngsters who are probably going on for higher education. And those institutions that are looking at your students, how are they going to know the proficiency level? There's so many ways the kids can game the system. Will you go back to oral exams like they used to do in the Dark Ages? Or how are you going to address the proficiency of a student that's applying to Yale or Skidmore, wherever they're going to go, and differentiate them?
I think the first question is proficiency in what? So there are some things that are 14th century skills that we need today, and those proficiency demonstrations need to change so that we're sure that the student actually has them. But there are other proficiencies that we don't care about, we don't test. Character, are you a good person? Can you stand on your own? Are you persistent? Are you curious? These are in many ways more important proficiencies than do you know how to conjugate a verb, and yet we don't care about them, we don't test them, we don't honor them. The entire assessment infrastructure has to change because we value things that may or may not help a kid be successful in the world that they're going to inhabit. Sorry.
I'm a medical librarian for the last 50 years, and we certainly are talking about ChatGPT for lots of reasons. But none of you have mentioned the partnership you can build with the librarians in your schools, as well as the public librarians. You've got two other populations who can be part of this. And shame on you for not doing that.
I would like my librarian, Dr. James King, who is here tonight. Dr. King is actually one of the leaders of understanding AI and the power and potential it has. And Dr. King has done a wonderful job of creating library guides and putting together incredible resources for our teachers and our students to use. Huge asset, and just because I'm sitting up here doesn't mean that I'm the only one in my school who's thinking about these things. So you're absolutely right, and our librarians are hugely important.
Use their budget
And just among Region 1, the library media specialists are really the pilot group, pioneer group that's exploring. Yeah.
You're right, but do know that all over the state, I mean, I travel around to a lot of schools. We have an organization in Connecticut in the public schools called CASTLE. It's our state association of school librarians. They are at the front of the pack on this work all over the state. They're doing great stuff.
Hi, no, I'm not the librarian. That's over here. I just had a question. Given all the benefits of AI, what are your thoughts on the risk of teachers being completely replaced by AI over the coming years?
No way.
It's not gonna happen.
Not gonna happen?
I always, one of my favorite maxims was any teacher that fears being replaced by technology probably should be, because they don't understand what their value is. If you can take a young person and elevate their sense of self, motivate them to do something they didn't believe they could do, give them confidence and faith in themselves, you're worth 3 times what you're being paid. And that will be the role of a teacher.
one teacher who really made an impact in your life, and it had nothing to do with their content expertise or how they taught their lessons. It was about that relationship. It was about that personal impact and the way that they lifted you up and showed you that you could be, a better version of yourself, and AI can't replace that. That's fortunately a human-to-human experience.
Because at the same time, I mean, I don't know.
I'm glad it's you and not me, because I
I mean, how many of you have used YouTube to teach yourself how to do something? I actually see AI tools and such. It's going to accelerate that and expand what that can do. It's going to be able to correct mistakes. You're going to be able to come back and ask her that question the YouTube video didn't cover. So I think it's more like, what is it you're trying to learn? And it may very well be that actually, some kind of tool or something with a lot more automation is actually going to be a really effective way to get you to some point. And then there may be some point where you have to have a human take over. But I actually think there's going to be certain things where you don't actually have to go get the rote training from someone anymore. It's going to be like, engage in this program and do this such. And YouTube is my example for that. Is like, I learned tons of stuff from YouTube, and I don't have to find a teacher for certain things, but they're pretty low-level, functional, step-by-step instruction type things.
Yeah. In the back, yes. Go ahead.
I was checking the time since
I know.
it's 6 minutes after 9.
6 minutes after 9. One more.
Okay.
And we'll.
Hi. So with AI, you have two different types of it. You have full AI, and then you have AI assist, which means so someone writes a paper, and then AI assists them and help them complete it. So I guess the question I would have, and I've heard some of these questions about education, is there going to be testing for those people who have used AI as an assist to help them draft a letter? Is it written by them? Does it have Quillbot or the other apps at the bottom of it that says this was written by John and this AI app? Or are they learning from these apps, like you're saying, and becoming smarter? Can we find out what's the strategy for that?
I mean, I think as far as writing is concerned, if I think I understand the question, you never had to cite a dictionary back in the day to prove that you pulled the word out of it that was beyond your vocabulary, right? This is a new version of a tool, in my opinion.
I tell you what, we're 5 minutes over, but we're glad to hang out. If you have other questions, come on up. We don't want to keep you longer than we said we would, but we really appreciate you coming out. We thank the forum. And thank you to the panelists. The students at Hotchkiss, Housatonic, and Salisbury are in good hands. Thank you.